Welcome to NTD News. I'm Jasmina Davis. Here are today's top stories. President Trump addressed the use of a drug that has caused a stir on social media. Twitter and Facebook took down videos posted by the president of doctors recommending the drug as treatment for the virus. Republican senators are criticizing one measure in particular of the GOP's relief bill proposal, the provision to construct a new FBI headquarters. They say it has nothing to do with the pandemic and should be excluded from stimulus funding. The U.S. Attorney General testified before Congress about the state of unrest in the country. Democrats criticized his decision to send federal officers into cities with ongoing protests and destruction. A police chief in D.C. says police removed protesters from a park in June because of public safety. He said the decision wasn't related to the president's photo op near the park later that day. Former Vice President Joe Biden announced his economic plan. He said he wants the Federal Reserve to focus on racial economic fairness. And the alarm was raised in the Galapagos Islands when a fleet of Chinese fishing boats came close to territorial waters. Ecuador's officials now want to address the potential threat in a diplomatic way. President Trump spoke about what he says has become a political issue, the use of hydroxychloroquine to treat people with the virus. In unprecedented moves, social media platforms are censoring videos of medical professionals who recommend the drug's use.
Thank you very much.
President Trump spoke about the benefits of an established drug, hydroxychloroquine, at the daily virus briefing at the White House.
Recommendations of
He has spoken before about the drug in treating the CCP virus and received heavy criticism by some mainstream media outlets. He also took the drug previously for a course of 14 days.
But many doctors think it's extremely good, and some people don't. Some people, I think it's become very political. I happen to believe in it. I would take it. As you know, I took it for a 14-day period.
There are mixed reports about the drug from doctors and healthcare professionals. Those who support its efficacy recommend its use during the early stages of infection coupled with zinc. The U.S. Food and Drug Administration cautioned against the use of the drug earlier this month.
The one thing we know, it's been out for a long time, that particular formula, and that's essentially what it is, the pill. And it's been for malaria, lupus, and other things.
The comments come a day after Twitter and Facebook censored information posted by the president and his son. The video included information about hydroxychloroquine for patients suffering from the virus. Twitter and Facebook removed the videos. At an event Monday in Washington, some doctors gave details of their own experiences of using the drug to treat patients. The social media platforms deleted videos of the event. President Trump noted that the doctors are well respected, and taking the videos down was like taking away their voice. This is not the first time Twitter has removed content posted by the president.
One aspect of the GOP proposal for the next round relief bill is drawing criticism from both parties. It's over the provision to build a new FBI headquarters in Washington, D.C.
The Senate GOP's proposal for the next virus relief bill is under scrutiny. Republican senators are criticizing one measure in particular that they say has no relation to the pandemic, the provision to construct a new FBI headquarters, a provision that would cost close to $2 billion.
I am opposed to non-germane amendments, whether it's funding for the FBI building or, for example, in the House bill, whether it's a tax cut for high-income earners in blue states.
Senate Majority Leader Mitch McDonald says he thinks non-related funding should be left out of the next relief bill. The money will be for the design and construction of a new headquarters in the District of Columbia. A number of Republicans questioned its inclusion in the proposal, saying it made no sense. McConnell said there are other measures in the House bill, dubbed the HEROES Act, that were also unrelated to the pandemic.
Marijuana studies or aid to illegal immigrants. When we get to the end of the process, I would hope all of the non-COVID related measures are out.
The GOP leader said that some inclusions in the Republicans' proposal were insisted on by the administration, and the FBI building was one of them.
U.S. Attorney General William Barr testified before Congress this week. A large part of the discussion was about protests turning into riots and the presence of federal law enforcement in cities. There was a stark difference between Republicans and Democrats in how they conversed with Barr. NTD's Melina Weiskup has more about the Department of Justice oversight hearing.
Congress Democrats accused Attorney General William Barr of not making it his priority at this time to end systemic racism in the police force. Some accused him of helping President Trump with his re-election campaign. Allegations Barr denies. More than once, Congress Democrats used their time to repeat allegations against Barr and afforded little to no time for the Attorney General to respond.
That's a myth.
It wasn't until this administration. It wasn't
claiming my time. In April.
As time went on, Republicans started to give their time to Barr to let him answer to accusations being made about him.
Since Representative Liu didn't allow you any time to answer his allegations, would you care to answer any of his allegations?
Yes. I mean, obviously.
Some discussion centered on Barr's decision to deploy federal agents to cities where ongoing riots are happening. A decision criticized by Democrats, but one that Barr continues to uphold. He says it's crucial to stop the people who have hijacked the peaceful protest and turned them into this.
A lot of protesters have been telling law enforcement and providing information to us about these people who are not with them, they're not demonstrators, but they're coming in. And a lot of the demonstrators leave when that happens because they see what's happening themselves.
Barr says on multiple occasions, the rioters throw weapons that have penetrated marshals to the bone, and a couple of them have been blinded with lasers. Some Republican congresspeople pointed to recent denials by Democratic Chairman Jerry Nadler, who says that it's a myth that Antifa is the group causing the destruction.
Going back to 1917, the Bolshevik Revolution, the Mao Revolution, some of these tactics we're seeing are not new.
Are you familiar with the letter that Chief of Police of Seattle, Carmen Best, sent to business owners and residents in that city?
Yes, I am, saying that, she cannot protect, she can't do her job. Her police force cannot do the job.
Barr says that originally they sent in only 20 federal marshals to Portland after a whole month of rioting. Up until last week, there were 29 marshals inside the courthouse and about 95 officers from the Department of Homeland Security in Portland to protect the courthouse and 3 other buildings. Melina Weiskup, NTD News.
As Portland's riots continue, Barr says they've increased the number of federal officers in accordance to the length and severity of the riots there. An acting police chief in D.C. says police did not clear a park near the White House for a photo op for the president. He said protests had turned violent the weekend after George Floyd's death, and police were justified in clearing the park shortly before curfew.
Acting Chief of U.S. Park Police Gregory Monahan said they cleared protesters from a park near the White House on June 1st for public safety. He testified they did not clear Lafayette Square for a photo op for President Trump.
What you're absolutely testifying, and I'd like you to make this statement, that there was absolutely no correlation, no direction to clear the square for the president's photo op.
There is 100% zero correlation between our operation and the president's visit to the church.
President Trump walked through the park after it was cleared and posed for a photo with the Bible in front of St. John's Church, which had been damaged the night before. Monahan said police were notified of the president's planned visit, but no one ordered them to clear the park. It happened 1 week after George Floyd died in police custody in Minneapolis. Monahan said police were justified in using force to clear the park about 30 minutes before curfew. But D.C. National Guard Major Adam DeMarco, who was on the scene, said protesters were subjected to excessive use of force. DeMarco unsuccessfully ran as a Democrat for Maryland's 3rd Congressional District in 2018.
Former Vice President Joe Biden rolled out his economic plan in his hometown in Delaware. He said it will combat racial unfairness in the U.S. economy. It's part of his Build Back Better economic plan.
Democratic presidential candidate Joe Biden promised that his economic agenda would combat racial inequality. He said the Federal Reserve's mandate is to promote maximum employment and stable prices. But Biden wants to revise that, to strengthen the Fed's focus specifically on racial economic equity.
Under my plan, I believe the Fed should add to that responsibility and aggressively target persistent racial gaps in jobs, wages, and wealth. revise its hiring and employment practices, and achieve greater diversity at all levels of that institution.
Biden's proposal includes a small business opportunity plan and giving tax credits to people who care for children, seniors, and the disabled. It's part of Biden's broader $700 billion plan to revitalize the U.S. manufacturing sector through new federal programs. Earlier this month, President Trump said Biden's plan threatens the entire economy through, quote, federal regulation at a level that you haven't even seen yet. Biden said he will announce his pick for vice president in the first week of August.
U.S. and Australian officials say they've tightened their bonds on a number of issues, like recovering from the pandemic and countering the CCP's coercive actions. NTD Miguel Moreno has more on the international talk.
Discussions on foreign policy between Australia and the U.S., and for the most part, addressing issues particularly related to the Chinese Communist Party.
We look forward to working together on our nation's ongoing economic recovery from this entirely preventable pandemic. Today, we reaffirmed our collective commitment to strengthening supply chains so that they're resilient against future pandemics, CCP retaliation, and the use of forced labor.
The Secretary of State commended Australia for its response against the CCP's sweeping national security law, rejecting Huawei and publicly condemning China's propaganda campaign. And to monitor disinformation, Australia's foreign minister unveiled a new system between them and the U.S.
We're therefore pleased also to be able to announce a new working group between Australia's Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade and the United States Department of State to monitor and respond to harmful disinformation.
Defense Secretary Mark Esper went over a recent display of naval cooperation between 5 Australian warships, an American carrier strike group, and a Japanese destroyer in the Philippine Sea.
These exercises not only bolster interoperability, but also send a clear signal to Beijing that we will fly, we will sell, and we will operate wherever international law allows, and defend the rights of our allies and partners to do the same.
Australian Defense Minister Linda Reynolds says they intend to establish a U.S. military fuel reserve in Darwin. She also says the two nations agreed to deepen their cooperation in defense science technology. Miguel Moreno, NTD News.
Alarm bells were raised when a fleet of Chinese fishing boats came close to the Galapagos Islands. The authorities wish to seek international consensus on a strategy to protect the marine fauna of the region.
The Ecuadorian Navy last week identified some 260 boats which came close to the Galapagos Islands. They raised the alert to the authorities. Most of these vessels were Chinese-flagged. In 2017, a Chinese vessel was captured in the Galapagos Marine Reserve with 300 tons of species. Ecuador said that it will take diplomatic steps to protect the Galapagos Islands. The country's officials will raise the issue at a meeting with delegates from Latin American countries. They wish to devise a common strategy to protect the marine fauna of the region.
As long as the diplomatic negotiation route is open, that will be the only route used in the hope, and with almost total certainty, that the problems caused by the presence of this international fishing fleet will be resolved through this channel.
The country is seeking international consensus on preventing activity near the Galapagos. With interference from ships, the delicate ecosystem of the area could be seriously affected. The archipelago has a wide variety of turtles, flamingos, and seabirds. There is also a great wealth of marine flora and fauna. The fishing fleet that was spotted had not yet entered the exclusive economic zone of the islands.
And coming up next, a Harvard professor is charged for lying about his ties to China. He's the highest profile case so far to emerge from a crackdown on Chinese influence in U.S. universities. And a boarding school in Southern California is set to resume classes this fall, but students will be embracing the outdoors during their lessons rather than a classroom. That and more after the break.
We are being censored. America's news outlets no longer provide the truth. 90% of news outlets in the United States are controlled by 6 corporations. They're not out to tell you the truth of what's happening. They're out to tell you the picture of the world that they represent. The mission of the Epoch Times is to chase the truth, to ground all statements in facts, and prevent people from being misled. The Epoch Times is independent. We're not controlled by any special interests, and we never will be. The Epoch Times is a non-partisan media. That means we don't stand for any political party. This is a battle between truth and deceit, a battle between forces that would ensnare this country in ignorance, and between a media that wants to present you with the truth. Subscribe today and join the Americans who are seeking truth and tradition. We'd love to have you on board.
And a former chair of a Harvard department has been charged by U.S. prosecutors for covering up and lying about his China ties. He's the highest profile person so far to emerge from a crackdown on Chinese influence in U.S. universities.
U.S. prosecutors brought tax charges against a Harvard University professor. Charles Lieber, the former chair of Harvard's Chemistry and Chemical Biology Department, is accused of lying to authorities about his ties to a China-run recruitment program and funding he allegedly received from the Chinese Communist Party. The Justice Department is currently cracking down on Chinese influence within universities. The move comes as concerns about spying and intellectual property theft by the CCP are rising. Lieber's case is one of the highest profile cases to emerge from the crackdown so far. His case centers on China's 1,000 Talents program. According to U.S. authorities, China uses the program to entice overseas Chinese citizens and foreign researchers to share their knowledge with China. Prosecutors say Lieber became a strategic scientist at a Wuhan university in 2011 and later contractually participated in the 1,000 Talents program. They further allege that under his contract, Lieber was paid up to $50,000 a month and living expenses of up to almost $160,000. He also was awarded more than $1.5 million to establish a research lab. In exchange, Lieber agreed to organize international conferences, publish articles, and apply for patents in the university's name.
Students at a small boarding school in Southern California will be attending classes outdoors to avoid spreading the virus. Pupils will return to campus in the fall equipped with a portable chair, a sun hat, and sunscreen.
At Midland School, students learn by experience in a classroom with only 3 walls, growing much of their food and even heating their showers by lighting a fire.
It's very exciting and very daunting. It plays to our strengths to be place-based, to be teaching outside, to be engaging with students experientially, to be taking a challenging moment and weaving that into the curriculum and the student experience.
Both Barnes and his pupils say they hope the small residential environment on the nearly 3,000-acre campus near Santa Barbara will help the school create a virus-free bubble if students return.
I think that going back to Midland specifically would be better than just staying here at home because of the isolation that we have there and everyone lives there. When I'm at home, my parents are going to work and my family is going in and out. And so I think I'm way more exposed here than being there.
Carr, an incoming Midland senior, says he's excited to return to school.
It's just one of my favorite places ever. It really changed my life going there and made me a way better student and appreciate nature so much more than I did before.
President Trump has pushed for schools to reopen in the fall. He sees the move as key to economic recovery.
Protesters chained themselves to a fence outside California Governor Newsom's mansion on Monday. They are demanding the governor release many inmates as cases and deaths rise in the state's prisons. Newsom plans to release 8,000 of the state's prisoners by the end of August. Our reporter Kevin Hogan spoke with the California district attorney about the consequences of the decision.
Bay Area prisons have become ground zero for a mass virus outbreak due to an inmate transfer where prisoners were not properly screened for the illness. In response, Governor Newsom plans to release 8,000 prisoners to the counties, where they will be put in apartments and motels using state taxpayer money so they can self-quarantine. El Dorado County DA Vern Pearson says the governor's move is well-intentioned, but it's a result of the state's mismanagement. He says part of the problem is making sure the inmates actually stay in quarantine, unlike what happened in Stanislaus County.
The probation department and health director there essentially get a phone call saying you have 48 hours to place this person. They'll be on house arrest and you're responsible for them, essentially. They placed them somewhere. They told them they were quarantined. And within, I believe it was 12 hours, one of the people left the quarantine and was arrested and taken into custody for doing that.
After reforms, California's prison population dropped over 60% during the last decade. Pearson says the 115,000 prisoners that remain are the most serious offenders. He's concerned the state is releasing too many inmates too quickly.
The Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation will make mistakes in screening individuals, and that they won't properly notify victims that the person's going to be released, and that we're running the risk of having someone who's a victim of a violent crime first learn of the release of the perpetrator when they run into him wearing a mask in a grocery store.
Pearson says prisoners don't deserve to be left in harm's way of the virus, and that prisoners who have serious underlying conditions who will be released soon anyway can be let out under the right circumstances. But he says the person's entire criminal history should be looked at instead of only their health.
You shouldn't get out of jail free pass simply because you have asthma. That's one of the criteria. They're looking at high risk people for asthma and basically essentially saying, well, if you've got asthma, we're going to release you. That's something that we're really concerned about.
The DA recommends safeguards to be put in place to protect the public. He says DAs should be notified of pending releases, as well as probation officers and health officials, and that DAs should review whether the convicts are actually more dangerous than they appear. He also recommends getting feedback from family members of the victims before releasing the prisoners. Kevin Hogan, NTD News.
New York City has opened 300 fire hydrants to help keep people cool as temperatures reach the 90s. It's part of the city's Cool Streets initiative launched last summer.
The hydrants are opened in communities where residents don't have access to air conditioners or can't afford the extra electricity for around-the-clock air conditioning.
You know why I coming down to my home to over here? Because in my home I don't feel good. I try and down, you know, I don't feel good because too hot. And then I remember the pump is opening. And then I come in, let me go into the pump because I don't want to see, you know, because too very hot.
Many of the public swimming pools in New York City remained closed due to the pandemic, so the fire hydrants are a temporary replacement for many city residents.
You know, this hot weather and the unemployment finishing today, this weekend, and it's been real hard for people, you know, to maintain, but I've been maintaining.
As opposed to years past when residents would open up hydrants that spew 1,000 gallons of water per minute, workers are now installing spray caps on hydrants at strategic locations that limit the flow to 25 gallons per minute.
Coming up, China has denied recruiting a Singaporean spy who pleaded guilty in the U.S. for working for China. He had access to government staff with high security clearance and the F-35B fighter jet program. And the University of Hong Kong fired a leading pro-democracy activist from his tenured position as an associate law professor. And Hong Kong's financial and political spheres are starting to feel the impact of the new law. That and more after the break.
大提琴不仅仅是一件乐器，它是有生命、有感情的，需要我们精心的照顾。往往我们一个小小的动作，可能都会对人情绪产生微妙的影响。天鹰的品牌是福星，我们对于传统的理念很荣幸被神韵艺术团选为指定供应商。时间是酿造音色的不可替代的陪伴。我跟大提琴已经有60多年的友情了，每一把琴都有它自己的个性，熟悉它，才能真正发挥它的潜力。所以，我希望给你的每一把琴，都是首先我所信任的。
And an update on the Singaporean spy who pleaded guilty to working as an illegal agent in the U.S. for a Chinese regime. NTD's Tiffany Meyer brings us more on the case.
On Monday, China denied knowing about a case involving a Singaporean spy. That's after Singapore's Dixon Yeo on Friday pled guilty in the U.S. to working as a Chinese agent. According to the U.S. State Department, Yeo was charged with recruiting U.S. government employees to gather intelligence for the Chinese regime. Court documents show Yeo used the internet and a fake consulting firm to hire unsuspecting Americans who had access to sensitive information to write reports. He then passed those reports off to Chinese agents. Yeo paid them thousands of dollars for each task, but never told them the reports would go to the Chinese regime. Prosecutors say Yeo began working with China's intelligence service in 2015. He was recruited while attending a forum in Beijing to give a presentation on Southeast Asian politics. His assigned tasks were initially focused on Southeast Asia, but gradually shifted to the United States. In 2018, Yeo created a fake consulting firm with the same name as a prominent U.S. consulting firm, known for its public and government relations. 90% of the resumes he received were from government and military employees with security clearance. Court records show Yeo recruited at least 3 government workers, including a U.S. Air Force employee with high security clearance, who was working on a military aircraft. The employee had access to the F-35B fighter jet program and obtained intelligence about the geopolitical implications of an aircraft deal with Japan. Another was a U.S. Army officer assigned to the Pentagon and a State Department employee. Yeo traveled to China a number of times to meet with Chinese agents and was given special treatment during these trips. Yeo was arrested in November of last year after flying to the U.S. to meet with one of his clients. Yeo will be sentenced in October and faces up to 10 years in prison. Assistant Attorney General for the National Security John Demers said the case was an example of how Beijing exploits the openness of American society. Now we turn to the Chinese expansion in the far, far north and why it's raising questions in the U.S. A Chinese state-run company is trying to purchase a gold mine in the Canadian Arctic. But China's expanding presence in the region is triggering alarms. That's because the area is growing in strategic importance thanks to its shipping lanes and resources. Former Canadian government officials have called on Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's government to book the purchase. U.S. officials have warned that China could assert itself in the sensitive region like it has in the South China Sea. Although participants approved of the deal, it still needs to be reviewed by Canadian authorities who have the final say. Now we turn to Pakistan. China and Pakistan have entered a 3-year agreement to expand potential biowarfare capabilities. The partnership includes several research projects related to the deadly anthrax bacteria. China has been criticized for its handling of the pandemic and speculations that the disease could have emerged from the Wuhan Institute of Virology. Now, the same lab has signed the covert deal with Pakistan to collaborate on researching emerging infectious diseases. The Wuhan lab has provided Pakistan with reagents for a soil-dwelling bacteria. It has a striking resemblance to another one known as anthrax.
And the world's largest pilots union said they want FedEx to halt its Hong Kong operation. Several pilots have been held in miserable conditions when they had to go into mandated quarantine. The union representing FedEx pilots called on the package delivery company to suspend its operations in Hong Kong. The call comes after some of its members were subject to what they called extremely difficult conditions in government-mandated quarantine. Several pilots who tested negative but had been in contact with individuals who tested positive were put into government camps under what they said were extremely difficult conditions. Was fired from his tenured position at a university on Tuesday. He was a central figure in Hong Kong's umbrella movement protest in 2014, which paralyzed the city for almost 80 days. NTD's Juliet Song has more.
The University of Hong Kong fired a leading pro-democracy activist from his tenured position. Benny Tai, an associate law professor, has been teaching there for almost 3 decades. He was also a prominent figure in Hong Kong's umbrella protests in 2014. The movement paralyzed the city for almost 80 days as demonstrators occupied main roads, demanding real elections for the city. Tai was charged with being a so-called public nuisance last year. He was sentenced to 16 months in prison, but was released on bail. The university later started reviewing his position. Tai wrote on Facebook that the university's move marks the end of academic freedom in Hong Kong. He added that he's heartbroken to witness the demise of his beloved university, but won't stop his fight for Hong Kong's rule of law. Outside of academia, pressure is also intensifying in Hong Kong's political circle. Prominent activist Joshua Wong said he doesn't plan to continue asking the U.S. or other countries for sanctions on Hong Kong. In 2019, Wong was one of the activists urging U.S. politicians to pass the Hong Kong Human Rights and Democracy Act. The change came in less than a month after Beijing imposed the national security law. Over the weekend, election officials sent letters pressing Wong and other Democratic candidates for their political stance on a number of issues, including the national security law and their lobbying efforts in the U.S. They were given less than 24 hours to respond. The national security law punishes acts like colluding with foreign forces with sentences of up to life in prison. Concerns are rising that Hong Kong's government will use the new law to disqualify opposition candidates during the city's elections. This ahead of the next legislative election, which is scheduled for September. Next, on to finances. A top Hong Kong politician says a U.S. bank closed one of his accounts. The revelation drew public attention as the U.S. recently announced sanctions on Hong Kong officials that helped implement the new national security law. Banks that do business with them risk being cut off from the U.S. financial system. The politician Bernard Chan is an advisor to Hong Kong leader Carrie Lam. He says his account closure has nothing to do with the law, as it happened before it was announced. He added that other senior officials are facing similar problems. In an interview with the Financial Times, he said, quote, "I am so sure it's not just me. I even talked to government civil servants. Banks don't want some of them too," unquote. Chan said banks have long been careful in dealing with prominent public figures, but that the U.S. sanctions would make them even more cautious in their interactions with Hong Kong officials. Banks in Hong Kong are now in a tough situation, as they have to both comply with the national security law and avoid U.S. sanctions. They've been urging authorities to clarify whether closing sanctioned officials' accounts would violate the law. Reporting by Juliet Song, NTD News.
Coming up, tech giants will testify in antitrust investigations. Congress is probing if the 4 biggest tech companies have gotten too far. And a prediction for the return of airline flight passengers doesn't look good. Air travel is still far below normal levels and in some places remains at historic lows. More after the break. The U.S. Congress has a rare opportunity to consider whether tech giants should be broken up due to antitrust concerns. The CEOs of Amazon, Google, Apple, and Facebook will be testifying today.
The COVID-19 pandemic has brought economic devastation for many American companies and especially workers. But for the biggest names in tech, business has been booming. And on Wednesday, the CEOs of Amazon, Apple, Facebook, and Google's parent company will face questions from Congress on whether they're too dominant, stifling the competition and harming consumers. It's a question a House Judiciary Subcommittee was probing pre-pandemic. Democrat David Cicilline of Rhode Island, the antitrust panel's chair, has overseen an investigation for more than a year.
Congress, not the courts, agencies, or private companies, enacted the antitrust laws. And Congress must be responsible for determining whether they are equipped for the competition problems of our modern economy.
While overall questions around the companies are the same, complaints about each of the businesses are unique. Among them, Amazon's dominance of e-commerce, the dominance of Apple's App Store, Facebook's purchases of social platforms like Instagram, WhatsApp, and others, and Google's overwhelming share of internet searches. All four executives will testify remotely, which may dial down some drama. Each has pushed back on antitrust claims and are likely to emphasize how the growth of their companies allows other companies to thrive, especially in the COVID era. Still, it could give a boost to other ongoing antitrust investigations at the state level as Congress debates its next steps regarding big tech.
Get ready to view more movies at home. AMC Theaters has reached a deal with Universal Studios that will make Universal's movies available for streaming earlier. Under the agreement, Universal's new films will be exclusive to theaters for 17 days or 3 weekends. That's a huge drop from the customary 70 days. After that, Universal and its sister studio, Focus Features, will have the option of releasing the film to video on demand. The agreement only applies to AMC theaters in the U.S. The Fed is extending the application window for some of its lending programs. They were due to expire at the end of September, but will now run through December.
The Federal Reserve announced an extension to a palette of lending facilities through the end of the year. Set to expire by the end of September, the programs range from small business credits to buying corporate bonds. They have provided a key backstop to the pandemic-ravaged economy, ensuring a continual flow of credit to businesses and households. Earlier, officials said the Fed was ready to use all necessary tools to support the economy amid the pandemic, including extending the lending programs. Fed policymakers have sounded largely downbeat on the economy in recent appearances. Lael Brainerd, a member of the Fed Board of Governors, said earlier this month that the recent spike in CCP virus infections clouded the prospects for economic recovery. Tuesday's drop in consumer confidence reinforced the theme that economic recovery is stalling. The Conference Board's index dropped lower than economists expected, from 98.3 down to 92.6.
McDonald's is reportedly closing 200 U.S. locations. USA Today says closures will be mostly in Walmart stores. McDonald's had planned to shutter these restaurants in the future, and the fast food giant says the timeline was moved up. That could likely be from the pandemic, which impacted operations at 30,000 restaurants. McDonald's says its second quarter net income fell nearly 70% to $484 million. An airline industry trade group says air traffic won't get back to 2019 levels until 2024, later than previously expected.
The International Air Transport Association spoke about the updated prediction in a press conference. Even though there was a small uptick in air travel, activity in June was weaker than expected. Europe saw almost no recovery, and passenger levels are still at all-time lows. Airlines are also facing a faster cash burn because traffic isn't increasing as quickly as carriers are adding capacity. The association is even worried that business travel would never get back to pre-virus levels. New technologies and working from home could mean businesses cut back on travel for good.
Best Buy is closing its stores on Thanksgiving, but shoppers will still be able to order items online. This follows in the footsteps of other retailers like Dick's Sporting Goods, Target, and Walmart, who have already announced their plans. Best Buy says it's working to offer more convenient pickup options and start offering some seasonal deals earlier in the year. Americans don't want to part with their trusty cars. New data shows they're driving older and older vehicles. The average age of cars in the U.S. is the highest it's been in decades.
Americans are hanging onto their cars and trucks longer, pushing the average age of vehicles on the road to the highest level in almost 20 years. That's according to new data from IHS Markit, and the trend started even before the pandemic hit. IHS Markit said the average age of cars, sport utility vehicles, and pickup trucks rose to 11.9 years in January 2020. That's up from 11.8 years from the year before. The number has been steadily increasing for almost 20 years. An associate director at IHS Markit says the recent drop in vehicle sales and reduced use will likely push the average age of vehicles on U.S. roads over 12 years. The aging fleet has been an issue as U.S. lawmakers have debated economic stimulus plans. Proposals to provide government-funded incentives to retire older, more polluting vehicles haven't gained much traction. Companies that manufacture and sell repair parts could benefit from the news. The United States has over 280 million vehicles on the road.
Up next, online giant Amazon is going after a bigger slice of the UK's grocery market by offering free same-day delivery. That and more after the break.
Viewers have described China Uncensored like The Daily Show, but about China.
In China, something can be illegal, but still in common practice. For example, bribery, or intellectual property theft, or Uber.
Well, at the beginning, I was super excited when I got 500 views, and now the show's grown to about 500,000 subscribers on YouTube. One episode reached 7.9 million people and counting. I'm a little freaked out that many people have seen my face.
Hey, have you heard of China Uncensored? It's starring me.
It's more and more obvious that China is having a major influence on the U.S.
Hey, have you heard of China Uncensored? 中国揭秘.
In 5 years, I see China Uncensored as the only show on TV or the internet. It will be the sole source of edutainment worldwide.
Have you heard of China Uncensored?
Yeah, I have.
You actually have? He's heard of China Uncensored.
I love China Uncensored.
This week on China Uncensored, the U.S. orders a Chinese consulate to close. The Chinese ambassador is at a loss for words when asked about Uyghur concentration camps. And the U.S. could put a ban on Chinese Communist Party members. Monday at 7:30 p.m. Eastern on NTD America.
Over to Europe, with the UK's online grocery market worth $28 billion US. Amazon is going after a bigger slice by offering free same-day delivery. NTD UK's Neil Woodrow will bring us more news from Europe.
Thanks. Welcome to the NTD UK newsroom, bringing you UK and European news. Online giant Amazon is going after a bigger slice of the UK grocery market with some competitive changes to Amazon Fresh. Since launching in 2016, Amazon Fresh was an extra paid service for Prime members. But now, for subscribers in London and surrounding area, next day or even same-day delivery is free. Worth $28 billion a year, the UK online grocery market is much larger than America's $18 billion market. Industry data shows that grocery sales in Britain have risen 14.6% over last year. Following on, the UK government is starting a $2.6 billion initiative to encourage Brits to cycle.
Research found that being overweight or obese puts people at greater risk of serious illness or death from the CCP virus. So the British government is investing billions to encourage people to lead active lifestyles.
You always could spend more. I mean, this is the most ambitious package ever.
Even family doctors in areas of England with poor health are encouraged to prescribe cycling. Another part of the scheme offers $60 repair vouchers so people can get their old bikes moving again. Thousands of miles of protected bike lanes are also in the plans.
Many people aren't very brave or confident cyclists. You need to get them on their bikes in a confident way.
The British government hopes the move will ease pressure on the transport network and health sector.
And world-famous luxury department store Selfridges is cutting 450 jobs, or 14% of its workforce. Its yellow bags are a familiar sight in London, but the lockdown and a drop in tourism have taken their toll. Opened in 1909, Selfridges' flagship store on Oxford Street is the second largest shop in the UK after Harrods. The privately held Selfridges Group also owns Halt Renfrew in Canada and Brown Thomas in Ireland. It's the latest big high street chain to announce job cuts this month. Marks & Spencer, Boots and John Lewis announced 6,000 layoffs between them. And a UK watchdog is looking to save car loan customers $212 million a year. Starting next January, Britain's Financial Conduct Authority, the FCA, is banning car retailers from receiving commission linked to interest rates on car loans. The FCA said this type of commission creates an incentive to sell customers more expensive credit. The ban should save consumers about 6% of the cost of their loan. To Europe, Germany is advising holidaymakers to stay away from certain resort regions in Spain due to a rise in COVID-19 infections there.
People in Spain aren't happy with Germany's decision, or with Britain and Norway that have imposed similar restrictions.
Yes, it does anger me, because they are not particularly better off. It's not that we are bad, it's that everyone is bad.
Tourism accounts for over 12% of Spain's GDP and nearly 13% of jobs. Germany announced mandatory testing for travellers returning from several high-risk countries, including Brazil, Turkey and the United States. Germany's Interior Minister says testing can avoid the disruptions of closing borders.
What I can hardly imagine, or rather not imagine at all, is that we will again be introducing border controls all over Germany.
Germany has had about 9,000 COVID-19 deaths, lower than many European nations, but cases have jumped in recent days.
That's all for now from our UK newsroom. Back across to New York.
A new blood test is boosting hopes for a simple, reliable way to help doctors diagnose Alzheimer's in the future. Recent tests show it's highly accurate at distinguishing people with and without the disease.
Oscar Hansen is a professor of clinical memory research from Lund University. He's one of the doctors conducting trials of a simple blood test for patients who might have Alzheimer's disease.
Tau is a protein that we believe is one of the main culprits that cause Alzheimer's disease. And the big breakthrough now is that we're able to measure this tau variant in blood in a very reliable fashion, which then helps us to diagnose Alzheimer's disease.
Hansen tested more than 1,400 people enrolled in dementia studies in Sweden, Arizona, and Colombia. This included people with no impairment, mild impairment, Alzheimer's, and other neurological diseases. The accuracy of the test outperformed a host of other diagnostic measures. The results were verified by brain scans. Hansen and his colleagues believe the blood test could allow earlier detection of the disease and reduce misdiagnosis.
This test actually shows Alzheimer's disease early on. So also when you only have very minor memory problems, it's very accurate. Unfortunately, it's quite common that a lot of people with Alzheimer's disease do not get diagnosed and thereby do not get the symptomatic treatment.
Although optimistic about the test's effectiveness, Hansen warns that it should not be used in young, healthy people who show no obvious signs of symptoms.
Coming up, Virgin Galactic reveals the interior of its space plane. The company plans to use the spacecraft for luxury tours of space. More after the break.
Hello there. Doesn't it feel like we're moving further away from the very values that our republic was built upon? And the media in our country have just been adding fuel to the flame, which is why you need to try The Epoch Times. It's pure, honest journalism that's restoring traditional values and reports the news with no spin, no hidden agendas, and no false narratives. So if you want to know the truth about the FISA abuse that took place during the 2016 election, or how socialist and communist ideologies have been infiltrating our society, or how the Chinese Communist Party's cover-up led to this global pandemic, and so much more, then you need to try The Epoch Times. And for a limited time, you can try the paper yourself for a full month for just a single $1, and we'll send you a very special gift. A 58-page magazine that investigates the truth behind the Chinese Communist Party's cover-up of the virus. So go to readepic.com, try The Epoch Times, get your free gift, and stay truly informed.
When you look at TV networks in America, a soundbite and fight-it-out culture prevails on news and commentary programs. As a Canadian, I'm fascinated with America, and I wanted to offer American thought leaders an opportunity to share their thoughts in a deep dive format, where we can explore their ideas together. And so American Thought Leaders was born. The world's most brilliant thinkers believed that open discourse was the key to greatness. However, all around the world, we see that discourse is being stifled and political agendas have subverted media. The Epoch Times launched its Global Thought Leaders program to bring back this great tradition of free thought. As the host of American Thought Leaders, every week I interview some of the most intriguing minds on the most pressing issues of our time. Be sure to check out our new episodes every week.
Richard Branson's Virgin Galactic space tourism company unveiled the interior design of its spaceplane. The company says it will ferry tourists and scientists to space in the not-too-distant future. Let's have a look inside.
With no less than 17 windows to give future space travelers a view from every possible angle, plus high-tech custom-fit chairs that strap in tightly for G-force speeds, and a mirror in the back of the cabin to show passengers what they look like floating once they leave the Earth, Richard Branson's space travel company Virgin Galactic is preparing to make space tourism as luxurious as possible. The billionaire entrepreneur's company revealed for the first time Tuesday what the inside of the space plane will look like when passengers finally get to take their suborbital flight to the edge of space. The space plane, as it is being called, is outfitted with just 6 passenger seats that will recline, allowing more airspace when passengers go weightless. Virgin Galactic has already sold out of its first batch of tickets, which cost $250,000 a ride for a 60-mile journey above Earth. The space plane has been outfitted with so much technology that passengers won't miss a thing during the 90-minute trip. By teasing the interior of the spaceplane, Virgin Galactic is trying to show it's making progress, even though it has yet to announce when customer flights will begin. It is currently in the late stages of flight tests. Branson is expected to lift off sometime this year, but he's not the only billionaire in the race to space. Amazon founder Jeff Bezos has Blue Origin, and Tesla CEO Elon Musk has SpaceX. Both companies have space tourism plans as well.
And that's all for now. Catch us again at 6:30 p.m. Eastern Time. I'm Jasmina Davis.
China denied knowing about a case involving a Singapore spy who pleaded guilty in the U.S. to working for China. He had access to the F-35B fighter jet program. The Wuhan lab has signed an agreement with Pakistan to expand potential biowarfare capabilities, including several research projects related to deadly bacteria. China's largest online travel company, Ctrip, is in talks to delist from the American stock market. The University of Hong Kong fired a leading pro-democracy activist from his tenured position, and Hong Kong's financial and political spheres are starting to feel the impact of the new law. And in a rare case of public defiance, a Chinese conglomerate criticized the authorities and made an accusation of corruption. Why does the company dare to do so? Its background reveals escalated infightings between factions of the Chinese Communist Party. Tune in at 9:30 p.m. Eastern Time and tomorrow at 5:30 p.m. Eastern Time to watch the full China in Focus.